Hello. Yesterday, I did something that was either very bold or very foolish, depending on your point of view. I cut my own hair. It was getting long and straggly, and I decided it was time to give myself a haircut. Now, the really bold or the really foolish part of it was that looking in a mirror, I can't work out left and right and back and front. And so trying to maneuver a comb and a pair of scissors was absolutely beyond me. So I cut my hair by touch, without looking. And it's turned out all right. Sometimes we have to be bold. And depending where others stand, they might see what we do as extremely brave or very, very foolish. We have to be sure that what we are doing is the right thing. There's a story in the Bible about Jesus and his friends. They'd gone to a place on the other side of a big lake from where they usually were, and they'd been followed by lots and lots of people. You may know the story. And they had an enormous picnic, and everybody was fed. But at the end of the day, Jesus' friends, the disciples, were tired and they wanted to go home. So Jesus sent them off in their boat across the lake, and he stayed behind to pray. It's another example of him withdrawing and spending quiet time with God in prayer. Now, Jesus' friends, the disciples, didn't get on very well in the boat. In the middle of the night, the wind was against them, the waves were rushed, the waves were huge, and they weren't making any headway. And they were quite frightened. So in the middle of the night, they looked out across the water, and Jesus came towards them, walking on the water. Now, they were terrified, really, really frightened. And Peter, who, along with John, was one of Jesus' best friends, called out. But Jesus said, "It's all right. It's me. It's I. I've got my Bible here." But Peter wasn't sure about this figure on the water in the middle of the night, in the middle of the storm. And he said, "If it is you, command me to come to you on the water." See what faith Peter has in Jesus. And Jesus says, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat in the middle of the night, in the middle of a lake, in the middle of a storm, which is either a very, very bold and faithful thing to do or something very, very foolish. But Peter had faith in who Jesus was, and he walked on the water. But he became distracted, and he realized the storm was still raging around him. The water was still really rough, and he began to sink because he took his eyes off Jesus. But Jesus held out his hand and held on to Peter and held him up. Now, it could be that depending who you are and where you are, that God is asking you to do a very bold thing, which may seem, to those around you, something extremely foolish. If you are new in your faith, it may be that he's asking you to find out more about him. Perhaps to purchase or read a Bible. Perhaps to join together with other people who are new in faith, to find something that will help you to learn more about him, an Alpha course or an Emmaus course. It may be that God is challenging you to do something very bold when lockdown finishes, to move your online faith to a faith where you visit a local church, where you find a local faith community. If you are already a Christian, then he may be challenging you to look at your faith practices. If you already go to church, are the practices of that church something that is really connecting with people? There's churches up and down the country and throughout the world, are realizing that there are those who need to hear about Jesus, who perhaps have been put off by our practices, by our buildings, by our singing or our worship or our seeming coldness towards the world. Maybe God is calling us now out onto the water. Maybe Jesus is there already amongst the lost and the lonely and the marginalised and those who are just beginning to feel the need of him. Maybe he's holding out his hand and saying, step out of that boat, and as long as you keep your eyes fixed on me, you won't sink. Can I encourage you to seek to know what God has for you, to pray about it, to think about it, and have faith that Jesus won't let you sink into the waves, that the storm and the tempest won't consume you, and not to fear what others think of you. What Peter did was either very bold or very, very foolish, depending on your point of view. Cutting my own hair was either bold or very silly. What's the worst that can happen if Jesus is stood in front of you with his hand out, promising to hold you up? Be bold and stay safe.